Hello everyone, it's Robin the Delta Crafter and I want to thank you for joining me for another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be using the first fall color combo that I made in my last video to create a card for you using that color combo. So let's take a look at that combination. So this is the card that I made using that color combination in the previous video. It is my fall color combo video and I'll be sure to link that below. As you can see on that card, there is some blue that's included in this card combo, and so we're going to be incorporating blue with these fall colors. We're going to be creating a wreath. So I just grabbed a wreath die out of my die set. This happens to be one from Spellbinders, but it's an older set. So if you have any wreath die cutting die in your stash, that will work, because we're going to be making some leaves to go on top of this wreath. And depending on how you layer up your leaves, your wreath may not actually be seen. You'll see when I make mine that very little of the wreath actually shows. So you can just use any wreath die you have in hand. I also wasn't sure if I wanted to use the larger die from this set or the smaller die, so I went ahead and cut both of them just to have on hand. Like I mentioned in my previous video, including blue in your fall creations is very on trend right now. So I'm going to start off by creating a inked up panel using this Faded Jeans Distress ink. So I'm just going to come in with that Distress ink and I'm going to cover about half of the paper. By the way, this is Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock in the 80-pound weight that I'm inking up. We're going to end up cutting our leaves out of this inked up paper, but we're going to get like all three colors laid down before we do our die cutting. So I'm just going in on the other half of the paper with our Spice Marmalade. Now, if you haven't used Spice Marmalade before, it is a beautiful orange color, but it's not like pumpkin orange. It's not like very in-your-face orange. I think it's beautiful in this combination, and it's one of my go-to colors during this time of year. Scattered Straw is going to be our third and final color, and we want to actually ink up about just a little bit more than half of this Scattered Straw, maybe probably like 2/3 of the paper, because we're going to end up using that same Scattered Straw inked up paper for our sentiment later on. So I'm kind of walking you through the process so you can see how everything is comes together later on. Next, I want to add more texture and more interest to this inked up panels by spritzing some water on these on the panels. These inks are water reactive. If you've never used distress inks before, they are water reactive. So I'm taking my distress sprayer and I'm spritzing the paper. You can just slightly pump the distress sprayer and large droplets will come out, or you can pull your trigger all the way and a nice spray mist will come out. I did a little combination of all of that, and that's how I got the different size splatters all over my paper. So I'm going to bring in my heat tool to kind of help the drying process along, and that's going to cut down our drying time quite a bit. So I'm just going to hit these inked up panels a little bit and get them to dry a little bit faster. So here's a final look at the inked up, spritzed, and dried panels that we created. I'm really happy with the direction we're moving in with this card. So now I'm going to bring in a 3D embossing folder from Tim Holtz called Foliage. This embossing folder gives great texture because it is a 3D folder. And to even define that texture more, I'm going to ink up the embossing folder so that when it presses into the paper, we're going to get kind of like a letterpress kind of look. So we're going to get that this rusty hinge color pressed into the paper with the design that's on the leaf design that's on the embossing folder. So I've just taken my my ink pad, I've rubbed it over the raised surface of the embossing folder. At this point, you could go ahead and spritz the paper to loosen the fibers a little bit as you run it through the die cutting machine, but I decided not to do that. I just didn't want my distress ink, because we're using distress ink. I didn't want that distress ink to react with the water that I spritzed on my paper. So you can see, I'm going to give you a closer look here in just a moment at the beautiful texture we were able to get with this 3D embossing folder. But before I put my folder away, I just want to wipe a microfiber cloth across it to pick up any remaining ink. So here's a closer look at that embossing folder. You can see where the image was pressed into the paper with that ink. Just kind of really gave a lot of detail to the images on the embossing folder. So now that our panels have had inked up panels have had just a little bit more time to dry, I'm going to bring in this die cutting set from scrapbook.com called Autumn Leaves. And you can see there I've already picked out some leaves and kind of arranged them using some mint tape in about an arrangement that covers about half of an A2 size panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run these dies through my die cutting machine on each of the 3 colors that we laid down in our inking. And here you can see what the results of that were. We got leaves in 3 different fall colors. So we got lots to choose from, lots of leaf shapes and sizes to choose from when we get ready to assemble our wreath. I'm going for lots and lots and lots of texture with this card. So in detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm bringing in a Copic marker in E37, and all of the veins that were pressed into the leaves, I'm going to use that E37 Copic marker and just trace those veins really quickly to bring out that detail of the veining. This goes by really, really quickly. It just, slide the leaves right along, and this took no time to do. What it does do is provide great detail for our finished product. So now that I've gotten all of the leaves, the veining on the leaves detailed and lined out, now it's time for us to go ahead and start assembling our wreath. So I'm bringing in some of the Artiste glue from scrapbook.com, and I'm just going to use this liquid glue to start laying out my leaves. And you'll notice that I'm going to start with the scattered straw colored leaf, and then I'm going to move to the Spice Marmalade, and then to the Faded Jeans. So I'm going like lightest color to middle color to darkest color. And I'm just going to keep rotating that color combination as I move around the wreath. Some of the leaves will be pointed towards the inside of the wreath. Some of them will be pointed towards the outside. You just want to kind of eyeball it and switch up your leaf style as well, and kind of just make sure that you have a combination of leaves that are pointing both directions and that give you a great finished look. Now, one of the things that I like about using liquid glue, liquid adhesive when I'm making these kinds of arrangements is once I get to a certain spot and I'm not happy with something, or I want to move something around, because the adhesive is liquid, I still have a little bit of time and flexibility to make some adjustments. So that you can see, but that's what I was doing just there. And that made me be able to fill in my wreath better than I had originally. So remember at the beginning when we're inking up our panel, I said that we were going to use part of that scattered straw panel to create our sentiment. So I'm using this Autumn Messages stamp set from Hero Arts, and I'm going to bring in that sentiment that says change can be beautiful, and I'm going to stamp that onto the scattered straw section or part of the panel. We're going to actually be doing some heat embossing. So I'm bringing in my Rabbit Holes Designs powder tool and just sprinkling a little bit of powder across the area where I'm going to be stamping this sentiment. Versamark ink is the ink that I'm going to be using. This is a clear sticky ink that catches the embossing powder when you sprinkle it over your stamped image. So I'm going to stamp this sentiment twice, just to make sure that I have really good coverage. And then I'll be ready to take it over to my coffee filter, and I'm sprinkling some gold Hero Arts embossing powder over that image. And then once I do that, you'll be able to see where the image actually was. So I missed a little bit of spot there, so I sprinkled a little bit more on, and I tap off the excess into my coffee filter, which makes it very easy to funnel that excess powder back into the jar. Now I keep a inexpensive makeup brush on hand to wipe away powder that may have stuck to some paper where I didn't want it to be. So I just use that makeup brush and sometimes a paintbrush as well to wipe the powder away. Now I did try to make this sentiment before, and I did not start heating it from the back. Once I brought my heat gun to the front, a lot of the powder just blew away. So here's a pro tip for you. Start heating your embossing powder from the back, which I normally do. I just didn't do this time. And that helps to keep your powder in place as you move your heat tool to the front and finish with your melting. So we're just about done here. We're going to be doing a little bit of assembly of our card. But before we do that, I'm going to ink up the edges of this card base. I did not want the stark white card base edges to be sticking out from behind our leaf embossed panel that we created. So I'm just bringing in some of that scattered straw distress ink and inking up the edges of our panel. I've taped that down and taped off the back of the card using some mint tape. And so now when I put our leaf panel on there, you're going to be able to see scattered straw just slightly around the edges, which is going to be a much nicer look than that stark white would have been. You guys know me, those of you that have been following me and watching my videos for a while, I love dimension. So of course I'm bringing in some foam tape to raise up this very textured panel. Just slightly from the card base. By the way, the card base is made from Accent Opaque 120-pound weight cardstock. And I put a couple of pieces of foam tape on there on the back of that panel. So we're going to apply that, lay that down on our card base. I'm going to use my tweezers just because that gives me a little bit more flexibility before I actually press the card panel, onto the card base. So there we go. I just noticed how my nails are matching the colors I'm using in the card, the blue in the card. That was not planned, but I like it. So again, we're gonna add some foam dots to the back of the wreath to pop it up from the panel just slightly. And I love how this wreath just goes edge to edge. It really makes a bold statement on this card panel, which the embossed panel makes a statement of its own. So I really like the way all these colors and these textures and the detail came together. Now, I knew my sentiment was going to hang off just a little bit, so I went ahead and put a foam dot on the back of that sentiment in just one area, and then using that same liquid glue, applied some of that so it could the sentiment could stick to the wreath and then be popped up so it doesn't, like, you know, crease or crinkle when we put everything together. And with that, everyone, this card is complete. I want to thank you all for joining me for another video on my YouTube channel. All of the products that I used today will be listed and linked below in the description box. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you have, please consider giving the video a thumbs up. You can always find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Delta Crafter, as well as at my website, thedeltacrafter.com. Until next time, everyone, enjoy!